All right, so there is this particular exit off the I-205 North that threw me initially. Now, the fact that I'm going to share this, it's not really that big a deal. This happens all the time, but it threw me once, and I think about it almost every time. But if you're on the I-205 and you're going north to I-84, right, here's the exit. Oh, that's a beautiful picture. I'm glad. The nice gray sky, you can't even see it. But that's the I-84 to go west on the I-84. Notice anything about that picture? Well, one of the things that's happening is that if you are on the I-205 north and want to go to the I-84 west, you have to go east. Yeah, initially. But that always threw me. It's like, wait, no, that's not the direction I want to go. Because as you can kind of see, it doesn't really go up and over. It goes down and under and back. And so it looks like, no, that's not the direction I want to go. If I'm basing it off of my intuition, I want to go west. Why would I go east? Well, ultimately, yes. It's based on the faith that I would have in that sign. Did that sign accurately tell me the direction I needed to go? Because my intuition would say one way, but truthfully, that I am supposed to go east if I really want to go west. I'm sharing this because we've been doing this series that I'm calling Signposts. And it's talking about that, about things that, beliefs that we'd have that would change everything. And this morning, this one is a real challenge for me. It's a challenge because I think the one we're going to talk about this morning is as unintuitive as this exit might be of going east to get west. It's not going to make sense in many ways because of what we're talking about. Let me just start with this idea of the signpost itself. The signpost that we're doing is, I am significant because of my position as a child of God. That if you were to believe that, it would change everything. Now, really what we're talking about is the formation of identity. Who I am. Now, a lot of this material that I'm talking about this morning came specifically from something I had heard Tim Keller talk about. He has informed me a lot on this. And so just that caveat, one of the things he talks about, he says, really when we're forming identity, we're answering three questions. If you want to know who you are, it's really about answering three questions. And the three questions, the first is, to what do I aspire? That's the first blank in your outline. To what do I aspire? What is it that I really long? What's the highest good? What is the thing that I worship? What would be the ideal? To what do I aspire? And once you figure that out, once you've got the thing, it's like, what would be the best and the greatest good? When you think about something good and right and wonderful, what is that? Whatever that highest level would be. The second question you would need to ask and answer is, what am I worth? What am I worth? In many ways, that's related to how you're doing on that first one. You've got this sense of aspiration of what is good, what is noble, what is right, whatever. And then your worth is based on how you're doing at achieving that, at being connected to that, at going to that level. I'm using a lot of different terms because different cultures have often translated that differently, and I'll get to that in a second. But then the third one is, who gets to decide? Who gets to decide whether I'm doing a good job? Who gets to decide whether or not I am doing all right in reaching that aspiration? That ultimately, our identity, if you have answers to the three questions, you have an identity. That's who you are. Because we have a lot of things in our lives that are identifiers, right? I can say, somebody says, who are you? Well, I'm Bill. Well, yeah, well, that's your name. Who are you? Well, I'm husband of Lisa and father of Lexi and Luke and Rachel. Well, okay, those are your relationships. Who are you? And ultimately, you can keep asking that question no matter what I answer. But what we're contending here is that once we answer these three questions, we're talking about the formation of our identity. Now, the thing is, our culture teaches us the answers to these questions. You have grown up in an environment that already answers these questions for you. And the thing is your culture doesn't tell you that it's doing that. Nobody's telling you they're helping form your identity, that they are telling you how to form an identity. It just happens. And ultimately this morning, what I want to do is I want to break that open a little bit to help you understand how your identity is formed in modern America. I do have an idea of what that identity should be, but I at least want you to be aware of what's happening. So if you get nothing else out of this morning, to understand how our culture tries to sell you on the answers to these questions. And I'm going to do that by pulling this curtain back and looking at a little bit. This is a super simplification. I feel like I've got to super simplify it for a couple reasons. One, you'd be bored out of your mind if I did more than super simplify. But the other reason is because I'm not really sure I could do much more than simplify it. So I'm going to make a distinction between traditional culture and modern culture. And by traditional, what I really mean is almost every culture in human history, apart from our modern day. Just about every single culture in our history would be a traditional culture. And traditionally, the way the culture would help you figure out who you are, your identity, is from the outside in. From the outside in. Let me see if I can paint this picture. So what happens is in a traditional culture, the very first thing that your culture wants you to do is figure out your role. What is your role? And that role is going to be based on a lot of things. It may be based on your gender. Women are going to have one role. Men are going to have another. It could be based on the class you were born in. If you are one of the poor, this is going to be your role. If you were one of the aristocracy, this would be your role. It may be based on your location, whether you're born in this spot or that spot, whatever it is, rural versus city, whatever, these kind of things, that they have a set of criteria to determine what your role is. So your role is coming from the outside, meaning it is given to you and it's told you what you're going to be. One of the prime examples of this, if you look at Taoism, Confucianism, that would be better an example, that if you look, I don't know if you've ever tried to read about Confucius's sayings, it's really helping their culture understand your role. What's your role and what you need to do? And then, so this is what you aspire to. You are aspiring to that role. You're aspiring to be that. And so your worth is dependent on how good you are at living in that role, and we call that honor. Right? You are honored if you live up to that role. If you are really good. So you have this thing imposed from the outside telling you who you're supposed to be. And if you are good at conforming to that, you will be given honor. If you are a Spartan woman and you give birth to a son who can be a warrior, you have fulfilled your role. You will receive honor. We will praise your name. We will recognize your name. You're a Spartan boy, and you end up going to become a warrior. We are going to honor you for doing that and being a warrior and praise your name. And so your worth will be based on how well you did forming into that. And then, of course, who gets to decide? Well, the people who honor you. The people who are handing out the awards. Your culture determines, your society is going to be the one that tells you whether you're doing a good job. Now, when I say traditional culture, I think I can make a pretty good case that that's pretty much every culture in all of human history. Honor cultures, you see that in Scripture as people are expected to fill certain roles. There's an understanding of what it means to be a Samaritan versus a Jew, of what it means to be a Greek versus a Jew, what it means to be part of the tribe, or something like all these rules, all these things about fulfilling their role. And you see that over and over and over. Now, that's not only true, it's true throughout human history. If you've studied, and you don't need to study, but some of you may even be familiar with honor cultures. Because the truth is when I talk about modern culture, which I'm going to move to now, I don't know if it's fair to call it modern, because in many ways, modern culture, I mean just the West, the United States and Europe in modern day. Because just about every other country is traditional culture, except for the United States and Europe. Maybe that's not entirely fair. The truth is we're having a lot of globalization. You're starting to get more of a Western identity in a lot of places in the world. And so maybe that's going to take over. I don't know. But again, an oversimplification. Modern United States and Europe is different than the traditional culture. Let me give you one more example of traditional culture. There was a sociologist, psychologist, evolutionary psychologist that was looking at different cultures. He went to India, and he was talking to one of the women there. Now, from his very New York, educated, rich, democratic world, he knew that this woman in India was oppressed because she had a very specific role as wife and mother that she had to fulfill, that she had to do these things. And he was arguing with her as she says, no, this is great. I know exactly who I'm to be. I know exactly what's expected of me, and I can live into that, and I am happy. Who are you to tell me that this is wrong? And it really caused him to think through that, because what he was looking at is he was looking at it from a Western modern identity and saying this can't be good. And she's looking at it from a traditional cultural identity and says it's very good. So let me describe the modern one, because this is the one most of us in this room have had to deal with. And that is, modern identity is from the inside out. Instead of these cultural mores, of these norms, of these expectations of who you are to be, instead, the way we modern Western folks establish our identity is we just figure out what's on the inside. What we aspire to is our deepest desires, our deepest dreams, our authentic self. If we can figure that out, if we can figure out what's inside and label that and aspire to that, that's what we need to do. So we aspire to be on the best me I can be. That I aspire to live out my deepest dreams, my highest ideals, like inside. It's not what culture tells me, it's what I decide for myself. That I decide these dreams. So answering the question, to what do I aspire? I aspire to be me, authentically me, real me, the me that has always been, I aspire to that. Now, how do I figure out what that is? Well, the thing is I have to do some inner work. I have to figure out what my dreams are. I have to figure out what I desire. And then, if I'm really good at it, what I need then is for the rest of the world to conform to my identity. I need all the rest of you to help support my dreams, to help me live, to give me the freedom, to allow me to be who I long to be. That your job as in relationship with me is to let me just be me. And in ways that we do that, well, before I get there, let me just answer the last question. And that is, who gets to decide whether I'm doing it? I decide. I validate myself. I decide whether I'm good at being me. I decide whether I'm doing a good job. So another way to look at it is traditional cultures are very community, culturally oriented, and modern is very individual and individualistic. I determine and decide who I am. Like I said, your culture doesn't tell you what it's doing. We just get it. We're just raised. We consider it normal. I don't know if this is tracking at all. But let me just give you an example, because if this is true in our culture, we're going to see it. We're going to see it in our stories. We're going to hear it in what we prize. We're going to see it on social media. So here is me going deep into American literature to help us understand the formation of modern identity. I'm going to talk about Disney's Frozen. Yeah, I started singing it too. But you know the story, and if not, it's repeated 50 zillion times. But has anybody not seen Frozen? Okay, I'll explain it afterwards to you. One out of all of you. But for those of you, that quintessential song, what's the big song from Frozen? Let It Go. And what's going on here is she has lived a life that was about her role and what's expected, and she is finally letting go. Matter of fact, here are a couple of the lines from that shows the formation of a modern identity. Don't let them in. Don't let them see. Be the good girl you always have to be. Conceal, don't feel, don't let them know. You see, that's the characterization that a modern identity person would have over traditional identity. See, we see the modern identity person looks at a traditional culture and says, that's what they're told to do. Don't be yourself. You just need to don't let in. Just be the good girl. Do what you have to. Conceal it or conform to it. That's a caricature of the traditional identity by a modern identity person. So that's who I had to be. Be the good girl. I conceal, don't feel, don't let them know. Well, now they know. And what do they know? That she has broken free. Here's the line. It's time to see what I can do, to test the limits and break through. No right, no wrong, no rules for me. I'm free. Now, I'm not picking on Disney's Frozen. The truth is I could probably have chosen 50 zillion examples in our literature and in our movies and our stories. But I think that encapsulates that idea on one level that the modern American, modern Western identity is saying, no rules, don't tell me, don't show me, just let me be who I want to be. So I want to suggest to you, and where I'm going to spend a little bit more of our time, is to tell you why I think modern identity is an illusion. I could spend some time where I think about the flaws in traditional identity, but for the most part, that's not us. The water we've swum in, the stuff that we are told is normal, is that modern identity stuff. And first, that modern identity is an illusion that leads to success, failure, whiplash. Let me see if I can break that down. See, when we make our identity based on what's inside of us, first thing I think we need to realize, and this isn't a blank in your outline, is that it's incoherent. It is incoherent. Meaning you can't, like that, if I were to ask you, who's you? What is it that you aspire to? I would be willing to bet, and I could bet everything on this, that you are not consistent in who you are and who you want to be. Because I know I'm not. I know that I struggle between things. I am fighting within all the time. You know, I want to be a kind, graceful person, but then I see how other people drive. Right? So which one is the authentic me? The one who aspires to be kind and grace-filled to people who are struggling on the road, or the person who says the things, or at least thinks the things, as I'm driving? I am incoherent. I struggle. I say I want to be healthy and fit, but then cookies exist. Like, how do I, and I war between those. I have these competing desires, these things, I want this and I want this, and they are incompatible. So which one is the true me? The thing is you can't figure that out. There is no true you, except to say, oh, well, it's really, really true in this moment, and then 10 minutes later, or a day later, or next Monday, it's a different me. And so if I'm forming the identity on what are my desires, they shift, they change from moment to moment, from time to time. And so it's absolutely incoherent. And so what do we want? What do we want out of that? You know what I want is I want to be able to just have a Michael Scott moment and just say, I declare. Does anybody get that reference? Yes, we got two people. I declare bankruptcy. It's like, that's not how that works. You realize that, right? But we try to do that. I declare identity. I tell you who I am, and I need the rest of you to conform to help me be that. I have established I am this. And I need you to tell me that that's true, because I'm not always sure myself. And that's how the identity is going to work, and it doesn't make sense. We compete, we fight. I feel like how am I doing on time? Let me just say this quickly. I feel like I could spend a whole lot more time because a lot of the issue of identity, I've heard people really struggling with this, obviously, when it comes to their sexuality or that kind of the whole LGBTQ identity stuff. And it's easy to talk about that as a formation of modern identity, but I just want to be clear, it should not be limited. It's not limited to that. Our culture, I suggest that the LGBTQ identity is actually a symptom rather than a cause of this modern identity thing. Take this. This was well before the LGBTQ stuff. How many times would you hear somebody, if you had an opinion on their life, or somebody else has an opinion, or something you don't like about their life, and they will say, "Don't judge me." Who are you to judge me? Is to say the outside doesn't matter. You don't have the right to suggest what my identity is. I choose it. You don't have the right to judge me. Well, what if I identify as a judgy person? Doesn't matter. That's not how our culture works. You see? So with that said, it's an illusion. Your identity, if self-discovered, is an illusion. Another example that Tim Keller has used, I've mentioned a couple times, but I think is a great example. Let's look 800 years ago in London. I've got to go, into Europe to talk about 800 years ago because it's not much of an idea of a United States identity 800 years ago. But 800 years ago, imagine a guy in London 800 years ago who finds two things. He looks inside himself and finds two realities. One, he is absolutely aggressive. Somebody gets in his way, his instinct is to push them down, to make them pay for standing in his way. Whether that comes in forms of violence or something else, he's aggressive. And he's same-sex attracted. He is attracted to somebody of the same sex. 800 years ago, he would have said, I will live into one of these and I will suppress the other. I will be honored and celebrated for the fact that I am aggressive and strong and powerful and push, that I can do that. But this other thing, I'm just going to hide it away. That's not really me. Now take that same guy and plant him in modern day Portland. I need to get therapy for my aggression. And I need to have pride in my same-sex attraction. Again, I'm not picking on aggressive people or same-sex attracted people. I'm trying to show you that the idea that I am somehow not affected by the outside is an illusion. Of course we are affected by the outside. We are relational people, and how our culture tells us to be matters. And we internalize that, even if we say, you don't judge me, I decide what's in, I will unfriend you. That's not how it works. And why I suggest that this is whiplash, because this is what will happen. And I say this, I can't prove it, I don't have time to prove it, I could demonstrate it, I could give you examples, but I just want to suggest it as a warning sign. If you find yourself, you've established this identity inside of who my dreams are, and I live up to it, then the success will go to my head. I will begin to think, because I have achieved this, I am good. I am worthy. And you begin to see people bleed over all the time. If they're successful in one area, they imagine they have a hearing in other areas, and we give it to them. We'll let our Hollywood celebrities talk to us about politics. We will allow businessmen to say, well, what do you think culture should be? And that the fact that they think it matters is because they have formed their identity based on what they're doing and doing well. But here's the other aspect, and I think far too often for most of us, is that because we've built an identity on some of these things, that if we fail, instead of success going to our head, our failure goes to our heart. Who am I if I'm not a mom? Who am I if I'm not a successful businessman? Who am I if I'm not pretty and rich? And we begin to think of ourselves as failures because we've built our identity on our dreams and aspirations that we've internally done. And we aren't. I mean, if nothing else, I believe, again, I don't have time to back this up, and you can question me on it later if you want, but I believe the epidemic of suicide we have in our country is precisely because we tell kids to try to form their identity in an incoherent, illusory mess. They can't do it, and they feel like failures, which strikes them at their heart, and there's no point in going on. So what's the solution? The solution is the gospel. And I'm going to, I don't have time to flesh this out, but I'm hoping to hear this. Again, here's the distinction I want to make. See if I can do this. Because it's really subtle here. When I say the solution is the gospel, I need you to not hear me say that the solution is being religious. Because if I'm telling you just to be religious, if I'm telling you to, be a Christian and go to church and do all this stuff that you need to do, isn't that me just trying to trade your modern identity for the traditional identity and me telling you what your role is and what you need to do? Right? But the subtle difference is that it's the gospel. Let me give you the best example I can. This is probably something you should look up and read more about, but let me just give the highlights to you. Remember, when Jesus is going to the cross, he is at the Last Supper, and he's even before that, he's talking to his disciples, and he says to them, you guys are going to run away. When push comes to shove, you are going to scatter, and you're going to abandon me. And do you remember Peter's response? No, I won't. Matter of fact, here's his response in Matthew. Peter replied, even if all fall away on account of you, I never will. What's he saying? Even if the rest of these schlubs mess up, I'm good. I am the brave and the strong one. I am the faithful and religious one. I am the one that will follow you till death. And for those of you who know the story, that's not what happened, right? What did he do? He denied him multiple times. Not just once, not just twice, multiple times that he said, He ran scared. He was a coward when push came to shove. And yet here he is saying, never me. What's going on here? What's going on? He is a coward. He demonstrated this. Jesus knew that about him. And yet he's like, nope. I'm one of the good guys. Even if all the rest of you disciples are that messed up. Not me. Contrast that to what I think Jesus calls our identity. He's not telling you to be the brave and the strong and the loyal and find your identity in the fact that you are a good Christian. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being a good Christian. I'm saying there's something wrong with finding your identity there. Where's our identity? Yet to all who did receive Jesus, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. If you choose Jesus, you are choosing something radical. You are saying, my identity isn't going to be based on what culture tells me. It's not going to be based even on my own identity. I simply choose to be adopted into the family of God. Man, I wish I had some more time to elucidate this a little bit, but let me just give you this example. I love my kids, and I need to tell you, my kids aren't perfect. Luke is, but none of the rest are. He's here right now. But just to say, but I tell you, as they mess up, and they have messed up from time to time, and as I try to form and shape them, I give them a way more grace than I'm going to give my dog. And I know this will shatter some of your guys' illusions, but I do not consider my dog part of the family. I know, it breaks your heart, doesn't it? It's her birthday today. But the truth is there are some things my dog can do to where if it got bad enough, and she's good, but if it got bad enough, I'd be like, okay, it's time for you to not be here anymore. never going to happen with my kids. They are my children. And that's just a shadow of the way God sees you. To understand that if you choose to be with him, he has chosen you. Let's go back to the questions. To what do I aspire? The gospel says, I aspire to be a child of God. That's what I long for. That's where I'm identity. Who are you? I am a child of the Most High God. I am a child of the Creator of the universe. What am I worth? I'm worth the blood of Jesus. You ever wonder what you're worth? Jesus was willing to pay in his blood for you. That's what you're worth. And who gets to decide? Jesus already did decide. Your identity is secure. Ultimately, I would love to be able to convince you of a truth I'm about to mention. But remember, I told you the whole point of this sermon is really to get you to start questioning and be aware, to pull the curtain back on how your identity is formed. You think it's just natural, but you have been taught something your entire life. Maybe you did grow up in a traditional culture. That can some ways feel entrapping. But you could also feel like you've been brought up in a modern identity culture and you feel unmoored, not even really sure who you are. And if you can, I'll just say it this way. You are not who your culture says you are. You are not who you think you are. You are who God says you are. And if you can internalize that, it'll change everything. Let's pray. Lord, I know I can't break free of the normal I grew up in. That in many ways I'm still caught, like it's still going to happen, and I get that. And there are moments when I think my worth is based on how well I'm achieving the authentic me. And because I know about these things, sometimes I think my worth is based on how dutiful I've been in the roles that I'm supposed to be. But that Jesus, you looked down at human history, you saw me, and you said, I choose you, please choose me. I can't imagine that, and so I'm an idiot to do anything else. So you know what, Lord? I choose you too. Help me to see me the way you see me. Not the way the culture sees me, not the way I even see myself. I see myself as your child, and I choose to live into that. And I aspire to be a good kid. But that you've already said it's not even about being good. It's about just being with me. I choose you, Jesus. Forgive me for all the times I do otherwise. In your name I pray. Amen.